Yo, what's shaking, everybody? It's another edition of the Orange Bloods Modcast here on the Orange Bloods Texas Football Channel. I'm Geoff Ketchum, joined today by Jason Suchomel, Alex Dunlap, no Anwar Richardson. He's got other Orange Bloods work responsibilities going on this morning, Thursday morning, as we record the video. I do want to remind everybody before we get started talking about TCU and looking back to kind of a surprising Texas Tech game 5 days later. It still feels that way, especially after I just read Alex's deep dig. Like the channel, subscribe to the channel, like the video, click that bell so that you'll get notifications whenever we release Orange Bloods content. You'll never miss a thing. Fellas, I think, I'm thinking back to this time last week when we recorded this video, and there was a certain amount of apprehension going into the Tech game. They represented a stronger opponent than Rice. They were statistically a team that looked like in some areas they could threaten Texas. We all picked Texas to win, Jason, but we didn't expect a blowout by any stretch of the imagination. And blowout Texas Tech they did. Then TCU loses to SMU, and it's put us in this position where going into the weekend thinking about TCU, I really struggle to know what the hell I should expect in this game. I mean, part of me thinks Texas should just beat TCU and maybe by multiple scores. And then the other part of me is like, yeah, but it's TCU, and that game has been kryptonite for Texas.
Yeah, I wish Anwar was here with us, because remember last week he said he's going to predict Texas to lose the next two. So I'm curious, boy, how perception changes.
You'll have to wait till Friday to find out.
Right. See our predictions on Friday, but on Orange Bloods. But yeah, that Texas Tech game, like you said, we all picked Texas to win. I don't think any of us picked Texas to cover. And on paper, it looked like a pretty even matchup to me. I don't think I've ever been so wrong on my matchups as I was in last week's game. Texas just obliterated them and really broke their will, beat them down. I think it almost looked like by early in the second quarter, Texas Tech had just thrown in the towel to me.
It was very much like the Kansas State game from last year, a little bit, where whatever you thought was going to happen, my God, it was the opposite of that in one-sided fashion.
70-35 could have probably been worse if Texas, A, would have stayed a little focused on defense, and B, kept the pedal to the metal on offense. I was talking to my neighbors and friends who always make friendly wagers. They're big Texas Tech fans. I said, hey, I'm not saying this to rub it in, because they didn't even get to watch the game. They were busy with some family stuff. I said, Jeff is his name. He said, I haven't even had a chance to watch it. And I said, Jeff, don't. I said, Texas probably could have scored 100. And I said, I'm not saying that to be rude. I really think they probably could have if they wanted to. But, TCU goes out and loses at home to SMU. They give up 350 rushing yards. I'm kind of like you, Ketch. Now I look at this game completely differently, and I'm thinking, okay, Texas on paper should win fairly easily, but it's Gary Patterson, but it's TCU. It's in Fort Worth. Weather could be a factor. So, there are a lot of unknowns coming into this game, and we'll get to our predictions, of course. I still think Texas should win this game in Fort Worth, but maybe not as comfortably as it suddenly looks on paper after last week. Is last week an anomaly, a 1 week anomaly for both teams, or is it going to be a pattern? I don't know. Probably the truth is probably, as always, I always say, it's probably somewhere in the middle.
Alex, your column today, let me tell you what surprised me. It wasn't the grades versus Texas Tech, because, you keep on scoring 70 points on offense, and with all due respect to the Josh Thompson pick six, but you do what they did on offense, and you would expect that the grades should come back positive, that that shouldn't be happening despite the offensive line. What surprised me the most about reading your column today, and if you haven't read it and you're an Orange Blood subscriber, obviously go check out the deep dig. If you are not a subscriber, this is one of the reasons why you should check it out. We have all kinds of content on orangebloods.com. Your offensive line gradings, including what Texas has done against TCU in previous years, that may have changed my way of thinking about this game as much as any other, because you pointed out that this group graded well in the most recent game against Texas Tech. And they haven't been a bunch of donkeys over the course of the last few years against TCU. That this particular group of linemen have actually achieved a moderate level of success that when you think about what they did against Texas Tech, makes me not completely dread what TCU might do to Texas based off of a decade's worth of beatings that TCU is emphatically giving Texas that really, I think, has everybody thinking sometimes those particular matchups are way more one-sided than maybe recently they have been.
Well, right, Ketch. I mean, on one side of the coin, you have the fact that you know that Gary Patterson right now is on life tilt, right? He's on life tilt. It's like he's putting. I mean, that's so cocky.
Have you ever been as on tilt as Gary Patterson has been this week?
Yeah, probably. I've been having a great Texas offensive lines for 8 years. But dude, I just have a feeling, man, he's putting everything he's got into making sure that, into making this thing hell on Texas. And we've seen it before, but like you said, that's what we have on one hand. And we also just have our long memories that are just ingrained into us on the other hand about these stunts and these twists and this exotic stuff that Gary Patterson does that has been so hard on Texas. But as I went and looked back, and to be fair, Christian Jones, Denzel Okafor, as you mentioned, they had their best games of the season last year versus TCU. If you look at Derek Kerstetter, he played center in the 2020 game. He didn't allow any disruption in the game. Last year, Junior Angelau had a solid game. He allowed 1 TFL. He allowed 1 sack. That's, it's not great. It probably wasn't his best game, and he was in between a great veteran and Derek Kerstetter, and then another guy that was a great veteran in Sam Cosmi. Last year, Angelau was playing left guard. So he had 2 really solid pieces around him. Not quite the same, this year with that left side of the line. If we go to 2019, Angelau and Kerstetter were next to each other at right guard and at right tackle. And I believe in that one, I said that Kerstetter gave up 1 TFL and 1 pressure. Angelau in that game had 1 QB hit, and he also had 2 penalties. So, I mean, not disasters. Not the games they're going to write home about and say that, it was the best game of the year, but that's not that bad considering I said, we can go back in not so recent history. If we don't even talk about 2019 and 2020, 2018, Kerstetter, he played right guard. That was between Sam Cosmi and Elijah Rodriguez was at center then. Kerstetter allowed 1 sack and 1 pressure in that game. You got to go back to 2017 for Kerstetter where he had a Gary Patterson disaster, right? 3 quarterback pressures, 2 sacks, and a tackle for a loss. If you look at the team as a whole, Gary Patterson really hasn't, 2019, 2020, he hasn't really done that much to affect what the offensive line has really been doing. But if you just go back to 2018, and 2018 is not that long ago, Patrick Vahe, 2 run stuffs, 4 TFLs, and 2 pressures. Calvin Anderson, who went on to play in the NFL, still playing in the NFL, 4 quarterback hits, a sack, a run stuff, a TFL. Sam Cosmi, who's been a recent day 2 draft pick, he's starting at right tackle, or at least he started the season starting at right tackle for the Washington football team. 1 TFL, 1 pressure, 1 hit, and 1 run stuff allowed. So, I mean, he's a guy who's created havoc for these guys. And I don't even want to go back to 2017, 2016, talk about the Tristan Nicholson stuff or any of the Cedric Flowers stuff from before that. I mean, there's been Marcus Hutchins. Jesus, there's been some games.
I was waiting for you to say him. Like that's my favorite. So
right. But just even in the not too distant past, and I just, like I wrote in my column, it feels like this is Gary Patterson. He's tilted. He's a cornered animal. This just like the Texas offensive line didn't give up any disruption in this game. No pressures, no hits, no sacks, no TFLs, no run stuffs. It was as clean as a game that they've played versus Tech in the last 7-8 years. They did have 2 penalties, but no disruption allowed. So obviously, I mean, they should be feeling good. Texas fans should be feeling good. It's not everything. It's certainly a start. But like I wrote in my column, man, I'm not sure they should be taking the cheese just yet. They put out this tweet. Texas football put out this tweet with the pictures of the 5 offensive linemen and said brick wall. I'm not so sure that they should be buying into their own hype just yet. This feels like a booby trap to me. Gary Patterson feels like a wounded animal. I've seen too much disruption this season from not good teams up that left side A gap, that left side B gap. They need to keep that stuff under control and just trust their coaching, play like they did versus Tech. Everything should be fine.
Alex, to jump in, I talked to a couple TCU sources, media guys, when I'm to do my matchups to kind of, I always like to get their insight. They can tell me more about the team than I can tell via stats or watching the games on television. And they're kind of bewildered with the TCU defensive line. Now they are getting some guys back this week, which will help, but that TCU defensive line has not been very good this year through 3 games. So it's going to, I don't know. I don't know what to expect. Like you said, okay, Gary Patterson you always feel like he's going to have some tricks up his sleeves. And you're right. He'll probably throw stunts and exotics and delayed blitzes and whatever he can at Texas. But this is not a TCU defensive line through 3 games that has done much. I think they don't have, I can't remember what the stat is. I think they have a total of three sacks from their guys up front. They're not playing well against the run. Obviously, I mentioned SMU rushing for 350. So for all the Longhorn fans watching this modcast, they need to hope that this isn't the week that TCU gets right. But you always have that fear when it's Gary Patterson against Texas.
Here's the other thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be those defensive linemen getting home. With Gary Patterson, some of this stuff, it's like the defensive lineman slants across your face. Next thing you know, the asshole up in the stands selling waters running by you on the way to the quarterback. Like, who even knows who's going to be coming? Like, he brings them from all over the place. So, yeah, man, to me, it's just like, if I'm the Texas offensive line, like I said, I'm walking with my head held high this week. It feels like there's some improvement in the air. Certainly great news for anybody that had pinned their hopes on Coach Kyle Flood. We said, the improvement needs to start at the beginning of the year. But it's just like, walk with the head held high, man, but eyes in the back of the head too, man, and a big stick. And just make sure that you're keeping your eyes out, because this is the kind of week that could be a trap.
Well, it's interesting, Alex, because like Jake Majors had a really good game. It was one of the things that jumped out. The Arkansas game's not that long ago. So to see Jake Majors respond, and the Rice game is the Rice game, but Texas Tech's a legitimate opponent. And again, statistically, when you looked at them on defense, it wasn't offensively the thing that I thought made them a credible opponent for Texas. They appeared to be on defense pretty balanced in their ability to defend both the run and the pass, and they equally got destroyed in the run and the pass against Texas. I wonder if, like, how do you guys view, what's your gut tell you about the style of game that we're getting ready to get? I know weather potentially is going to be something that impacts this game. It might be wet. It might be raining during the game. For a Texas team that is running the ball pretty well and TCU not stopping it, at least last weekend against SMU. Like, I don't want to get into predictions right now, but do you think Texas wins this game comfortably, or do you guys think in the fourth quarter we'll learn a lot about this Texas football team?
I've got it on paper as a game in my matchups. I've got TCU controlling their offensive matchups against Texas. I've got Texas controlling the offensive matchups against TCU's defense. The difference is I have Texas controlling special teams, and the Texas advantages I have are bigger advantages than what TCU enjoys on the counter side. So on paper, it looks to me like a game Texas should win by 2 scores. But I factor in the fact that it's in Fort Worth. Gary Patterson, as Alex mentioned, he's going to want this game badly. The weather to me is going to be really interesting. Both teams run the ball well. Both teams struggle statistically to stop the run. Interestingly, Ketch, when if you look at the stats, these two teams are pretty, like, everything I looked at, like, defensively, Texas is 7th in the Big 12, TCU is 8th. Like 3 or 4 different stats I look at, and they're right there. It's always Texas just a notch above TCU. And they both had their bugaboo last week. TCU did with SMU, Texas with Arkansas. That kind of skewed some of those numbers. But they're kind of similar. So I think there should be offensive success in this game on both sides. TCU is getting some parts back on defense. Texas, I think, statistically should be better on defense. I think it's a better defense than what it's showing statistically. gave a lot of big plays last week, just kind of lapses of judgment or concentration. The weather to me is kind of maybe the biggest mystery in this game. If it's raining, which they're saying it probably will Saturday morning, if the field's wet before the game starts, how is Casey Thompson going to handle a wet football, a heavy football? I mean, maybe I'm getting too deep with my analytics here, but like, I don't picture Casey as, I said, Brett Favre, a guy with just a cannon of an arm. For everything Casey Thompson's doing well, it's more about timing and accuracy, making good reads. How is he going to be able to throw the ball downfield? Will he be able to throw it effectively downfield with a wet and potentially heavy football? I don't know. We haven't seen that from Casey Thompson. You might have to rely on the run game. Both teams run the ball really well. Both teams implement the quarterback run game. Yeah, I don't know, man. I personally, I think it's going to play closer than my matchups seem to indicate it will. But I do think Texas is the better team on paper, certainly.
What about you, Alex? You sounded like a guy that thinks a bit of a hairy game on Saturday.
Well, I just got done doing my write-up and, doing the game. And this is always the point where we record this podcast. This is the point where I'm turning my attention to the opponent. Obviously, my column this week was more than usual, sort of looking forward as opposed to looking back, because what can you really say when you look back on this thing? It was a really good game. It was a really good game. Like there wasn't very much to complain about. There wasn't much to explain about why this, every week I'm explaining why this broke down, the hand placement, stuff like that. There wasn't that much to explain. So it's more like, what does this mean for this next game? This game that I've been worried about, right?
It's been a game that I picked Texas to lose all year long.
Right. Because there's so much on either side. So I'm still conflicted, Ketch. I mean, I'm sorry that I don't have a good answer for you. I don't know how this thing.
No, that's fair.
I don't know how the weather is going to play out. Boy, if they can get anything close to what they got out of Xavier Worthy last week, that thing could continue to go big time, man. That's starting to pop off. Ketch, I think you might have bought low on him on the old NIL deal. You might have to up his appearance fee next year. Talk about a superstar in the making, though, man. Jesus.
I'd like to think I've got an eye for talent,
Right. I mean, I think that if it's raining, Texas has a stable of really good backs, man. And if Texas can just get the run game going and they don't need to rely on dropping back too much and letting Gary Patterson really have these guys pin their ears back and just come on some of this stuff I'm super worried about, I think that inherently kind of falls in Texas's favor in two different ways. One, you're getting the ball into Bijan Robinson, Roschon Johnson, and Keelan Robinson's hands more often, and those guys are threats every time they touch the football. And you're not allowing the defense to be in such an attacking mode. They're gonna have to be more on their heels and having to deal with the run game. So I think if we're talking about the weather and how that could affect it, I think it would probably help Texas.
I have a theory about this game that may end up being wildly wrong, but it centers around this idea that I thought of on Monday, which is Texas might have. You can make a case that maybe we're not going to know the answer, like really and truly, until probably the end of the season. But Bijan Robinson's a superstar. I mean, he's legitimately special. We've been lucky enough, all of us, to see some amazing running backs come through this town. That we're asking questions about him in conjunction with Jamal Charles or even Ricky Williams and guys like that. I said on Monday that I think the Casey Thompson, Bijan Robinson, Xavier Worthy trio of prominent offensive players at each position is probably the best three that Texas has had since 2007, when you had Colt, Jamal, and Lima Swede before he got injured, right? But since then, even if you were to count 2008 and 2009, you've got Colt McCoy, Jordan Shipley, and or Quan Cosby. But then you'd have like a Chris Obanaya at running back, or you know what I mean? Somebody who's just not what Bijan Robinson is. But we can have the conversation. It feels like it's either that group of guys or nobody, because nobody in the last decade. Right now, Casey Thompson's the number 2 quarterback in the country in passing efficiency. And I mean, he dips below that, okay. Texas hasn't had a quarterback in that breadth in a long time. They're doing it with a running back who might be the best in the country, and they have a wide receiver that, when it's all said and done, I think Xavier Worthy's going to be offensive newcomer of the year. So I think it may be that Texas and its offensive personnel is about to score a lot of points. I look at TCU, though, and they weirdly have their own little big three. And it's about how good can Max Duggans, Zach Evans, and Quenton Johnston be against Texas on Saturday. And I think we might be in for a real barn burner, and that we so often think about the physicality of these TCU games because they've done such a number on Texas. I can't help but, and I wonder what the rain does to it, but TCU's got a nice little trio that they feel really good about. And Zach Evans is waiting to have a national coming out party on some level. I mean, that guy averages.
He would love for it.
Oh my God. Yes.
I mean, and people who follow recruiting, they remember this is a guy Texas went after hard, and I was almost Zach Evans and Bijan were 1 and 1A and top national backs. I mean,
when Zach Evans made his decision, it felt like, well, when Texas kind of fell out of it, Texas fans didn't really understand that, like, oh, we're going to get Bijan. Yeah. It felt like a memorial needed to take place when it felt like
Stan Drayton's house. Yeah.
Yeah. It was a really dramatic thing. He averages more than a yard per carry more than Bijan Robinson.
As good as Bijan's been, Zach, and he only got 5 carries in his first game, and he's still rushed. I'm looking at it now. He's rushed for 330, averaging almost 8 yards a carry.
No, their usage of him is weird sometimes. Yeah. A little bit like Bijan from a year ago, where it feels like they still are like, well, let's just not make him the number 1 guy on our offense. But, and Quenton Johnston's not a bar. I don't think he's Xavier Worthy, but if you told me that he showed up this weekend and had a big game, I'd be like, yeah, I could see him going for 150 and 2 touchdowns because he's immensely talented. I just wonder if it's like the first 1 to 45 wins this weekend. And it's been a while since we've thought about the Texas offense in a way where it's like, doesn't matter who they play. If they get into a gunfight, they'll be okay. Have I talked you guys into the possibility of this potentially being a score fest, or no?
If it wasn't for the weather, I would probably agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think both offenses, like I said, have the advantages over the defense across the board. But I think weather will be a neutralizer there potentially. I think we'll probably start hearing a lot more about the Zach Evans, Bijan Robinson stuff. I'm sure in pregame or during the game they'll talk about it. But people forget about, Quenton Johnston was a former Texas commitment who flipped to TCU. So there are a lot of interesting storylines in terms of the recruiting of these players and the animosity they may have, probably more so towards Texas than Texas has towards TCU. But I think it's interesting when we're talking about these running backs, Zach Evans and Bijan, and I'd put Roschon Johnson in this category too. They're all tremendous running backs. I think that how those guys play is going to determine to a large extent who's going to win this game, who runs the ball better. Are they going to try to do too much maybe? Zach Evans, he wants this. You got to know he wants his game. He wants a breakout game against Texas. I think Bijan and Roschon, they're different mental players than Zach Evans. There's no secret. Zach Evans has had some troubles at North Shore. I think, and I don't know, I think he maybe suspended for the first half of their season opener. So, listen, I covered Zach as a recruit. He was always great. I always liked the kid, but, I think he's got still some maturing to do. Whereas Bijan and Roschon, they're way more mature than I am, and I'm almost 50 years old. So, I wonder if they're asked to carry the load, how each side of that is going to handle it. Might one of them cave if things aren't going well, or, get frustrated? Might one of them try to do too much and go outside of the game plan and what's asked for them? I don't think you'll see that from Bijan and Roschon. I think if Texas can maybe get in Zach Evans' head a little bit, maybe slow him down early, maybe you talk a little trash under the pile there, whatever you have to do to kind of get him frustrated and get in his head. I think it'll be interesting to see how those running backs respond. Because ultimately, whoever runs the ball better in this game is probably going to win the football game.
I can't believe how I memory hold all this Quenton Johnston stuff. You guys were talking about him. I'm like, I can't remember. It's so hard for me to watch all these Big 12 games. I was just like, Quenton Johnston. I'm like, what kind of player is that? Then you said he was committed to Texas. I can't believe that's just like somehow something that but I go back and I look at him and now I remember him. And my question to you guys is, now I remember I remember thinking about him sort of like one of these AJ Green, sort of Slim Shady types of guys. Has he put on more weight since he was a recruit? Is he bigger? Is he a little bit bigger now? He was so tall and skinny.
What was he listed at then, Alex, as a recruit? Do you have it?
I'm
showing 6'4", 201.
Right at 200 pounds.
He's listed at 6'4", 201. So he's still long and lean. But this is a guy who is an elite athlete, was an elite high jumper, can stretch the field. He did, I think, last week, he dropped a deep ball. That's been an issue for TCU in talking to TCU folks. Duggan has missed some throws downfield. When he's actually made the throws, Quenton Johnston's dropped a couple, so have a couple other guys. So still a little bit raw and inconsistent, but yeah, tremendous, just natural, raw athlete.
I just with Deshaun Jameson last week, I mean, he definitely, you worry a little bit about these guys that are a little bit taller, they can go up a little bit or can maybe get past him on a double move. He had two really, really bad reps in a row versus some of these speedier guys. So it'll be, I mean, Quenton Johnston's got some size and speed. I think that, hey, Ketch, I'll tell you another thing now that I'm thinking about it. If there was rain and you could take that guy a little bit out of it, if he is kind of one-dimensional, as Jason was saying still, that would take that guy more out of it, I think, than it would take a guy like Xavier Worthy, who you saw in the touchdown to Xavier Worthy. It was my favorite play of him through the whole, which touchdown? You saw in the touchdown down at the goal line, right? The goal line touchdown, one of his only 2 snaps that he took out of the slot all game long. And you just see what he did to that poor nickel corner. You just like, golly, this dude is just so smooth. I mean, you can have that guy operating within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage, making some really, really nice moves for you. So I would think that maybe if there was rain, it could, if we're talking, if Quenton Johnston might not be that far along in the nuance that he plays with quite yet. I think it would affect a guy like that if he is kind of more predominant deep threat than it would affect an Xavier Worthy, who's a threat any blade of grass on the field.
With all due respect to Zach Evans and his like nearly 8 yards per carry, it feels a little bit like TCU has a poor man's version of Texas's big three, that you wouldn't say Duggan's is quite, what Casey Thompson has been, certainly. Same thing that you just said about Quenton Johnston, that you wouldn't say right now. Xavier Worthy, even 4 or 5 games into his career, I think feels like a more bankable product. I don't even, I've seen too much of Bijan now. I got to be honest, like I just keep looking in the box score on Zach Evans. I have not seen a lot of TCU. So this will be my first. I remember Johnston from last year. He had some moments that made you go, oh, wow, that guy's going to be an NFL player, regardless whether he went to Texas or TCU. I can't wait to. I'm just really interested to see how this game goes. We keep Alex getting into a position. I think I said this exact same thing last week. I find myself excited about Saturday because so much good happened the week before that, especially with the offensive line, there's this question of how much progress are they really making? And I feel like TCU's been a game all season long we would have pointed to and said, we'll find out a lot about Texas in this game, because this is the kind of game that Sark was hired to win, right? You've lost 7 out of 9 to TCU. That has to stop. And so, these are one of these games that you wouldn't have a lot of faith in Tom Herman winning, I don't think. If he were back this year, it would feel like the dynamics hadn't changed. I wonder if they have. It's one of the reasons why this game is so interesting. I don't know that there's completely a question there, so I'll ask this. What is the most concerning thing? And Jason, I want the same answer for you here in a second, in the sense of going into Saturday, there's rain, there's a little bit of unknown. There's the offensive line and always worrying about that. What is, if there's any one thing for you, the thing that going into 11 a.m., you're most concerned about going sideways on Texas?
The offensive line, for one, but for two, I would say this is the first time we see Casey Thompson in a road game.
Yep. First start.
That's a little bit, that's something. I mean, if you're looking for things to worry about.
Probably be 50% Texas fans at that game, though, honestly.
Yeah, but I mean, there was a bunch of weren't there a bunch of Texas fans at the Arkansas game?
Not that many.
Completely shell-shocked, though, in an away game, and not understanding of just not understanding of how it was different. Or, I mean, clearly, I don't know what the team's mentality was in that game. Damned if I know. Maybe they don't even know. But clearly, they played like crap in an away game. So it's an away game. Early morning, could be weather. Defensive line still not. The defensive line needs to get some. Keontae Coburn needs to get some run stuffs. Zach Evans is breaking these things off at 8 yards a carry. They need to up the number of run stuffs that they're getting along the defensive line. The linebackers have been cleaning it up just fine, but Keontae Coburn, Morwood Jones has been improving, but they need more from him. God, they need a lot more from Jacoby Jones. Number 3, as far as what he's been able to do standing up against the run so far this year. Number 88, Barron Sorrell has been coming in and actually looking, after this last week, he logged more snaps than he has all season. He looks like he's a guy that's poised to step up and maybe take over a starting role if he can continue to play like he did. But it's just especially standing up against the run, getting those run stuffs, getting back on the positive side of that, just because they have not been getting them this year like they had in the past.
I'm Jason. Same question to you.
Alex hit on some good ones. Offensive line, obviously. Hey, is it fool's gold? What we saw last week? They need to back it up. Obviously, Casey Thompson's playing as well as any quarterback in the country, but this will be a tougher test than he's faced. I think for me, probably the last thing Alex is talking about is just Texas's run defense overall. 8th in the league in the Big 12. Arkansas, what was it, 341, I think Arkansas rushed for, or something like that. It would have been more than that. It would have been 350, I think. They had to take a couple of kneel downs. But Texas has to be able to slow down TCU's ground game with Zach Evans, with Max Duggan. And I'm not saying hold them to 120 yards of rushing, but you can't allow TCU to come out on first down and run the ball for 6 yards and set up 2nd and 4. You do that repeatedly, and TCU's capable of doing that. And the Texas run defense hasn't shown a capability of really stopping that kind of attack. So if TCU is able to run the ball effectively on first down, that's going to make it really tough for this Texas defense to get stops and get off the field. So for me, it ultimately comes down to run defense for Texas and probably run defense on first down, if I'm being overly specific. That would be my biggest concern for Texas, and I think that could be if I'm really trying to pinpoint one element that might turn this game, I think it comes down to run defense early in the series of downs.
I think my biggest concern is just the flow of the game going against Texas early, the way that it did against Arkansas, right? Where TCU may not even be good on defense, but let's say they come out jacked up early on, get a 3 and out, or just get Texas off the field a couple of, like maybe they don't consistently do it all game long, but they're able to do it in the first quarter. And if TCU is able to combine that with their offense making some big plays, which I think it's really capable of, like I think Duggan's is an average quarterback, but on his best day, he can beat you. And if he comes to play, when they get the good version of him, TCU is going to score some points on Saturday. And then it's about, are you chasing the game? Because that's what I think ultimately undid Texas against Arkansas. They were chasing the game. And we always can kind of look back and say, if Jordan Whittington had caught that ball in the end zone where he didn't catch it, it wasn't a great throw, but his hands got on the ball. It's a 1-score game going to halftime, and it just feels a little different. The only time Texas has had to chase a game this year, they unraveled. So, I think this team getting off to a good start the last couple of weeks has been key to what it's done. I think that probably be my biggest concern is not the opening script not working on defense or on offense, and then the defense just not matching TCU's intensity level. Before we go into parting shots, Jason, the last thing I wanted to talk about with this game is, there was this is the first Big 12 road game. So this is probably the last time that TCU fans are going to get a piece of Texas. Like, we don't know when exactly that move's coming, but it may not feel exactly like 2022, but 2023, it feels like some ducks will be in a row, and that's doable. If that's the case, this is the last time TCU gets to hate Texas in person. And before the season started, we were wondering how are these Big 12 games going to go? Like, what I think 11 a.m. helps Texas because it's not everybody's been drinking all night and the place is ready to have the stadium on fire by 7:00. But, I don't know. Like, I wonder what the vibe of the game is, because before this season started, I would have been like, oh, that crowd at TCU is going to be foaming at the mouth. Are they? Is that going to be a thing?
That's a good question. I hadn't really thought about it, but I don't picture TCU fans as hostile and volatile as like I do Texas Tech, maybe even Baylor, to be honest. I mean, Texas always takes a lot of fans to Waco, of course, but I mean, you're going to see a lot of Texas fans at this game. And TCU's owned Texas of late, okay? But I don't think it's because of fanfare and fan emotion. I mean, they've owned them in Austin for the most part. They've certainly owned them in Fort Worth. So it doesn't seem to matter where they play those games. So it's an interesting, I haven't thought about this first road game with most likely TCU fans' last shot to kind of get their shots in on Texas on their home turf. So, that I haven't thought about it, but it's an interesting point. But I don't think, just off the top of my head, I don't think it's as big an issue. Let's say if they were going to Lubbock this week. I mean,
if it were a night game, Jason, if it was a 7:00 game.
That changes things a little bit, sure. But I still don't think it'd be as if they were going to, Lubbock's crazy, again, Waco. I mean, obviously.
You've never heard TCU mentioned as
just
the night when all hell broke loose because their fans are so rabid.
Right. No, exactly. So they'll be rabid, but I think Texas will be ready. It won't be like anything like what they faced in Arkansas. I mean, they've seen worse this year already. So.
Well, and that's kind of what I was wondering. It can the TCU crowd remotely be 3/4 of what Arkansas was and become a factor? Or is this one of these stale Big 12 atmosphere games where I think that plays into Texas's hands this weekend? If it's not, and it's just both teams trying to do their business, I think one team's better than the other. But if we're trying to figure out how TCU beats Texas, it feels like generating some momentum and buzz in that stadium. And maybe it has to come from the play on the field first. And that gets everybody dialed up more so than everybody's dialed up in that, because that would have been the opposite at Arkansas, right? Like, they were frenzied before the players fed off that. Yeah. I don't know at 11:00 in the morning, TCU's capable of that, but on paper, these are the games that Texas, they're all supposed to be a little extra harder because Texas stabbed everybody in the back and went to the SEC. This is the first time we would see, if on Saturday it's crazy, we'll go, oh, well, I guess every game on the road this year is going to be a little bit like that. But this is the unknown, Alex, because we hadn't seen it yet.
Yeah, I have a hard time thinking an 11 a.m. start in Fort Worth, where, like as Jason said, man, there's a lot of alumni up at Fort Worth, DFW, for Texas itself. 11 a.m. start. I think it's not going to be quite as raucous as a night game up in Vietnam, where they've been boozing all day, getting ready to rekindle an old rivalry for sure.
All right, well, let's go into parting shots. There's only 3 of us today. Does anybody want to lead off? I can lead off because I've got a parting shot that's actually football related. So
I thought it was going to be about Ashley Home Store and Furniture.
Do you guys want to hear that story?
Have you not done a parting shot yet?
I have not done the Ashley Furniture.
Okay.
I will do the Ashley Furniture guy. I'll do Ashley Furniture.
But listen, I don't want to be the reason why
you just reminded me.
The listeners don't.
That was like a week ago.
Related.
So
Texas related.
It's like a week ago. So it almost is out of my brain space.
Okay.
My short-term memory. That you know what's going to happen, Alex? You're going to get that guy fired because I'm going to tell this story and it's going to re-piss me off. And now I'm reminding myself because I called the national office on Friday. And I waited on hold for 30 minutes. And then the woman was like, this is so-and-so. And then I got disconnected. And it was Friday. And I was just like, I'm not going to call back. And so I was like, I'll call back on Monday, but I haven't done it because this week's gone by and I'm just family stuff here and family stuff there and getting ready for all this. I'm going to tell this story. And then when I'm done, I'm going to call the national office as soon as we're done with this. And I'm going to wait on hold. And I'm going to get that. And they probably won't do anything, but boy, I'll be fired up by the time I'm on the phone with somebody. Because I'll be like, by the way, you guys hung up on me when I waited on hold for 30 minutes on Friday. Because I think their national offices are in Wisconsin. So I was like, they're all at the Ryder Cup. Nobody that I need to talk to is working on this Friday. Yeah. They're in Wisconsin. They're at the Ryder Cup. All right. So let me tell everybody the Ashley Furniture story. In June, my wife and I, when we moved to the Woodlands, we were going to go ahead and buy new furniture for the kids, new beds. We didn't even bring my son's bed with him because this big Lightning McQueen monstrosity that we had for him before was just too big, too much of a pain in the ass. I think I paid somebody to take it away. So they got their beds and the guy was there when this happened. The salesperson said they'll be available end of July. Kind of, you got my word on that. My wife, for whatever reason, keeps on hearing the parting shots in consecutive weeks. She just chimed in to say July 30th was the official date. I didn't want these beds from Ashley Furniture, but the delivery date was playing a role in what we decided. I caved in. July 30th rolls around, the beds aren't ready. And then they kind of act like, well, we never told you that July 30th was the date, but then they gave us a date like the next week in August. It was like August 5th, August 7th, something like that. That date goes by, there's no delivery. I go into the store and I meet with the manager, and like, we have it out. And I'm like, look, your guy lied to us. And I was like, I can live with the fact that supplies are hard to find. And, but I was like, I was in the room, I heard it. This guy gave us a guarantee. And now you're telling us that there's no way a guarantee could have been given because you guys don't know when anything's being delivered ever. Like, you can buy it and we'll give you a date, but it's iffy-ish at best. So I was like, you're telling me that. It's been over 2 months or almost 2 months since we bought the beds. You got kids at home
who were waiting on. They've been told that there's new beds coming. They probably want some temporary beds as they wait for some new ones to come.
They've been sleeping on the couch.
They got some school starting up. They need
yes.
Yeah.
So my wife is on tilt because that's what she's like. The kids, their school year has started and they don't have beds. So I go in and this guy is like, yeah, I just started working here and this store needs to be cleaned up. And I'll talk to the manager about this sales guy because that can't happen. He tells me that they're waiving the delivery costs as a show of appreciation for my patience and all of this. And he says, September 15th, that's the new date. Well, September 15th comes by. There's no beds. There's no calls. There's no nothing. So I go back into the store again and I asked to speak to the manager. And all I want to know is when are the beds going to be delivered? I mean, I don't want to have the same conversation that I had in September. I just want to know when the beds are going to be ready. And I get there and the guy's like, September 15th. I don't even show you in here as being scheduled for September 15th. And I'm like, what about the meeting that I had with the manager of this, like one of the other managers? And I told him, I said, look, I can't remember what his name is, but he was an Indian gentleman. So I was like, I just said he was non-Caucasian. And he was like, oh, it was that guy. And I was like, yeah, I guess it was the guy that I spoke with. He was like, oh, he doesn't work here anymore. He only worked here for like 2 weeks. So I'm like, are you telling me there's no record in your computer that I ever came by and have a face-to-face meeting? And he's like, no. And I'm like, you're telling me that I walked out of here that day being guaranteed September 15th, and you have no record of that taking place? And he's like, no. And I'm like, well, I want to speak to the manager. He's like, doesn't work here anymore. And eventually I got to it like, you hired that guy, right? And he was like, yeah. And I was like, so he is your responsibility, right? You're the big boss. It turns out though, that I still didn't have a date. He could not tell me when the beds were going to be delivered. It was still TBD. And I'm like, dude, it's last week of September. Last week was like the 22nd. I was like, it's been over 3 months since we bought these beds, and we bought the beds from you guys because you gave us a guarantee in July. Well, this guy pissed me off because he couldn't give me an answer, a good answer. So he was like, I'll just cancel this order and you don't have to worry about it anymore. And I was like, what the hell kind of answer is that to me? I've been waiting for 3 months for this to be delivered, and you're just he's just very casually like, and later on in the meeting, he was like, he got mad at me. He was like, I'm going to cancel your order. And I was like, no, you're not. You are not going to cancel my order. I was like, I've waited 3 months. I was like, I am pot committed. I want the beds. I want you to tell me when you can get the beds. And I was like, it got to a point where he just couldn't give me answers. And he was having a little bit of an attitude with me. And that I wasn't taking kindly to that. So I started asking for, who can I call that's your superior? Because I was like, when I asked him, he still had not spoken with the salesperson. He had no idea. I was like, what kind of Mickey Mouse operation are you running where I come in here and have a problem with a salesperson lying to us? And I was like, look, you can tell me it's not lying. That dude gave me a commitment date by July, and you're telling me that it's impossible that he would have done that because you guys have no confirmation dates on any deliveries? I was like, so that what didn't happen by accident. I was like, I go, this guy still works at the store, right? He was like, yeah. And I go, you've never had a conversation with this. 3 months have gone by. I've come in the store 3 times. My wife has called. This guy still doing his thing, and you've never once talked to him about it. He was like, no. And I was like, and the guy that I spoke with before, he doesn't even work here anymore. You guys have I go, am I getting my delivery for free still? I was like, because he told me that. That was like his big, ta-da, this is what I'm doing for you. You're going to get free delivery. And I was like, am I still going to get free delivery on this? And the guy wouldn't commit to giving me free delivery. Jesus. And at that point, the thing is anybody who's ever gotten into an argument with me on Orange Bloods knows, I have a hard time saying goodbye to a good fight. Like, I have to have the last word. And this guy, I was my meanest, most vindictive. I got very snarky, in part because this guy's intellectual capacity wasn't very high. And I started critiquing him on the fact that his name, it says manager on duty at the store. It's in a very high profile place, but his name wasn't listed. And I just made a point that, as far as I can tell, that's appropriate for his level of management, that he probably shouldn't have a name listed because he's been the manager for the last 3 months. He's never heard of me. He doesn't know about any of my concerns. He doesn't give a shit about them. His response to, hey, why can't you guys give me a date, was to be like, he literally said, dude, we get thousands of purchases. I'll refund you right now and you can just leave. And I was like, what kind of like, so yeah, Alex, I lost my shit. I got loud. I could have been, by the end of it, I got thrown out. By the end of it, there were people in the store and I wanted them to know, hey, whatever they tell you about when your furniture is going to be available,
don't take the bait.
Don't take the bait. And I was like, the manager sucks. I said it much better than that. Like I was in rare form. Like it was one of those days where you mean-spiritedly like choose all the wrong words. Like I didn't walk out of there thinking to myself, I wish I had said this. I said exactly what I wanted to say. And that guy will remember me for the rest of his life. I can't imagine that he comes across many people who buy furniture from him that probably made him feel as small as I did before it was all said and done. And I'm still so pissed about it, Alex, that you've now reminded me I got to Karen this up all the way to the top. I got to go all the way as far as I can go to find somebody who is that guy's boss, because they have to know how shitty of a job the location on I-45 outside the Woodlands, that particular Avery, what is it called?
Ashley
Furniture.
Home Furniture.
Sorry, I didn't mean to slander the jewelry company. Ashley Furniture on I-45 is a disaster. Its management is the most aloof and incompetent group of bastards that you've ever seen. And they've been apparently in the furniture business forever. And all I can do is like shrug my shoulders and go, God, that must be one dirty ass incapable industry if these guys are managers at a big store. It was like walking into, it was like meeting Michael Scott the first time. Before he becomes lovable, he's just an idiot. And you're like, how's this guy a manager anywhere? How?
At least he comes through in the end, though. At least Michael Scott usually always comes through in the end.
This guy comes through because they sell so much stuff in bulk that it doesn't matter that they're a disaster in terms of, customer relations. Like, this guy's the manager of the store, and he didn't even try. It's like,
do you have a new delivery date? Have they given you?
Well, that's the thing. So I took the first step and called the delivery. They gave me a delivery date for October 5th.
Oh my goodness.
I'm supposed to get a phone call 3 days before October 2nd. So we're talking tomorrow. It's Saturday, right?
Saturday. Yeah.
So Saturday, I'll be waiting for that phone call.
Ketch never answers his phone. He will on Saturday, though.
Oh, never answer my phone. I will have it next to me in the middle of the postgame show if needed. I will take that call on air, but I have no hopes.
Yeah, hey, let me
will be delivered on October 5th.
I'll piss you off even more. You realize with Ashley Furniture, we've bought stuff at Ashley over the years. If you go to some of these mom and pop discount furniture places, they can all order Ashley furniture, and they'll beat Ashley Furniture prices. So not to rub salt in the wound, but
and you can't make it worse, Jason, because it's about the principle now. It's about like meeting with people and being told things. And like, I didn't even tell Heather about they're going to give us free delivery because it was so, I just want the furniture.
Yeah,
I don't want your rebate of a couple $100. Just give me my stuff. But when I showed up and I realized, wait a minute, what do you mean the guy that I talked to doesn't work here anymore? And I didn't have, like, when I realized that was a waste of my time, I was so mad. And now, now it's just about stop wasting my time.
Well, we bought furniture for our daughter about the same time. It was a 2-hour delay or 2-month delay. I'm sorry, for delivery during COVID. So that's all legit, but they did bring it about 2 months later. They brought a nightstand and a dresser. We bought the bed from someone else. The dresser was messed up. One of the drawers wouldn't open. So I called them. They came, picked it up, brought another dresser. Another drawer is messed up. They took it out.
This was from Ashley, this story?
No, I'm sorry. This is from Living Spaces.
Okay.
So they brought a third dresser. The drawer's messed up. I said, just take the dresser and the nightstand out. And they said, okay, but it's going to cost you $75 to take that nightstand out because it's not defective. And I was like, bullshit. I said, I'm not keeping a nightstand and not the dresser. I'll carry it to your truck myself. They finally agreed. They waived the fee. And that was 3 months ago. And she still has all her clothes in black trash bags. So
real quick, Alex, before I let you guys, my parting shot to the parting shot, Mike at Ashley Furniture, the manager, can straight up kiss my ass. I'm done.
I feel like since I go to Ketch into that, like that'll be good for my party. I'll just say, man, like I said, man, at Ashley Furniture, just like I said,
I've goaded you into a few, Alex. So it was you. I owed you one.
No sponsorship from Ashley Furniture in the future.
Look, the theme at Ashley Furniture is the same theme for the Texas offensive line this weekend. I keep saying it. Don't take the bait. That is my parting shot.
Jason, what about you?
I'll talk a little football before you button this one up. I'll have an update in the war room tonight that I think is pretty interesting, and I hope fans will too. And I'm going to preview it a little bit. I talked to it was Malik Murphy's quarterback coach. Actually visited with Malik Murphy last weekend. They were in town for the whole weekend. Came in town Friday, went to the game on Saturday, flew back Sunday. They actually met with the Texas coaches on Friday and went over some film stuff and for the game and broke down the game, what's going to happen. And it was pretty interesting, man. Like, and this is why I love about this new coaching staff. I think X's and O's. I mean, you guys have heard me say before. I think Sark's is about as good as anyone out there. Some of the things that they said, hey, look, this is going to happen. The game is going to unfold this way. Very specific things ended up unfolding that way. Very specific plays that they said are going to work at certain points of the game, worked at certain points of the game. They called, hey, we are going to block a punt off the edge with Keelan Robinson. Obviously ended up being offsides. But I just thought it was pretty interesting to hear his perspective. Like he said, no, they sat in these position meetings and he goes, it was pretty incredible. A lot of the things that they said were going to happen unfolded exactly the way they said they would, be it plays or the time of the game. And I was like, you know what, kudos to the staff. You know, we've seen, I think it was the Louisiana game when Sark made some adjustments on the fly. There was talk after that. Maybe it was the pass to Bijan. I can't remember exactly what play it was, but he saw something and made some adjustments on the fly. I think it was the pass to Bijan for the touchdown. And like, man, it's great to see a coach who can like adjust his game plan within a game, but also have a game plan before the game that, you know, comes to fruition and actually works. So we'll have that. We'll have some other stuff in the war room tonight on recruiting. We had some visitors last weekend. So
I
everybody,
think that's really interesting, Jason. So
I thought so too.
If they listen to the modcast and then they read it and they're like, that sucked, Jason, you built it up too much. It wasn't nearly that good. I just want you to know from the bottom of my heart, I found that to be interesting.
Well, I'm counting on you to be the one guy that thumbs up the war room thread.
I will be your hype man. I'll be like, that was the best thing ever. Hey, real quick. I saw a tweet earlier today. Did you know that today is the 39th anniversary of Cheers' first broadcast?
You're shitting me. I had no clue. And as you can surely see, I'm wearing a Cheers. I've always been a huge Cheers fan, and my mother-in-law just happened to buy me the shirt a couple years. I did not know that. Well, good timing on my part. September
30th, 1982. Because I was dwelling on that. I was like,
I wanted to be
that show cannot be 40 years old. It upset me. I was like, no.
Crazy. That's crazy. I was a huge Cheers fan, and like I idolized Sam Malone when I was growing up. I thought he was the coolest guy in the world, man. So,
and Alex, you'll be glad to know that 2 years later, in 1984, on this date, first episode of Murder, She Wrote.
Yeah. Do you guys have a place that you go in your life that's like a business establishment where everybody knows your name? I definitely have one.
Not now, because nobody knows me in the Woodlands.
Mine is Texas Honey Hams.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I think that's where I picked a fight with Anwar.
I was going to say, that sounds familiar.
I think the manager there makes all the employees memorize all the regulars' names. So,
yeah, I think that was Anwar's Honey Ham story that led to met the nice little old lady, and then remember I picked that fight. I can't even.
Yeah, Anwar hung up on the modcast or the podcast. It was a podcast. He's like, I'm done. Click.
I didn't realize that it was gonna be such a touching story. I thought, never mind. No, I don't have one of those places. I'm not Norm anywhere.
Maybe soon. You're just now settling in the Woodlands.
Yeah. Anyway.
How much
On that
ham
note,
are you eating? That's what I want to know, Alex. How much ham are you eating? That's your spot.
Yeah,
Not a
what's
bar.
your exactly? That's a good question.
It's the tacos.
Oh, okay.
Really?
Yeah.
I trust you, so they must have really good tacos.
So ask anybody. Ask on the board, man. Everyone will tell you. Best kept secret in Austin.
At the very last moment, if for no other reason, you now know Alex's secret taco advice. Like the video for no other reason than that little bit of information. Like it. Give me a pity like for my Ashley Furniture experience. It's about the only thing I'm getting from them right now. Subscribe to the channel. Get the notifications by ringing that bell. For myself, Jason Suchomel, Alex Dunlap, even without Anwar today, it was a fun and I enjoyed it. So thanks for watching the Modcast. We'll see you next week.